Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining our one of our seminars here on financial planning. It's good to be with you. For those of you who haven't attended before, I'm Brian Jarasinski. I've been doing this for 20 plus years at this point as a certified financial planner. My colleague Michael Hotch is on here as well. I'll let him introduce himself shortly, but we look forward to spending the next 30, 45 minutes with you guys, guys and gals. I know you're joining us either from some of our 401k plans or some of our health insurance plans or whatever it may be. Just housekeeping items off the top. So I know some of you are joining us and need to make sure you get those wellness points. So the passcode for that on this seminar is NESTEGG, NESTEGG. So for your wellness points, when you do your survey at the end of the seminar, feel free to use that passcode so you guys can get your points. Just to mark your calendars, we'll remind you at the end as well. But our next seminar talking about understanding risk and various insurances, that's going to be on September 10th at 2 p.m. I believe it's Eastern Standard Time, but you'll be, you guys will be, if you guys are in here, you're going to be on the email list and you'll get that as well. So, I know we're all busy, so try to mark your calendars for that. With that, I'll let my colleague Michael introduce himself real quick, and then we'll get going in the material.
Yeah, thanks as always, Brian. And yeah, so again, Michael Hotch with NFP. Brian and I are partners here in our Washington, D.C., Bethesda, Maryland office. As you know, NFP is a much larger swath. And as advisors, what Brian and I, we kind of hold ourselves out. We call ourselves investment behavioral counselors, right? Because the reality of it is we can only control our behaviors and our actions. And the purpose of today is to walk through with you and to kind of make you think and kind of engage you with regards to what it looks like, right? Nowadays, it's not just going on your phone or the internet and getting some information, but there's a lot of thought process that leads up to kind of what it looks like. How do you monetize? How much do you need? All of these things. So we'll kind of go through this. Brian will take a couple of the initial slides. I'll take some of the others. If you have questions, by all means, there's a chat that we have afterwards. We'll open up. I think it's probably easiest to put questions in the chat. And then if Brian's speaking, I'll try and address some of them and we'll vice versa go off one another here. So again, I appreciate
this is truly meant, we're independent fiduciaries. This is truly meant to be educational. So our goal and what gets us going is to make sure that you guys walk out of here with good tidbits of information. You get some questions answered. Laura said she can't see anything. Is everyone seeing the PowerPoint up on the screen? Maybe just put a chat, maybe do your thumbs up, hand raise, or there we go. I got a lot of thumbs up. Oh, good. Look, a lot of people are engaged. Look at all those thumbs. There we go.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
People are live out there. I'm seeing a bunch of no's as well, though. That's weird. Well, maybe, again, some of our back-end team, Kelly, and our folks can look into why you're not seeing it. But I see a lot of thumbs up. So, again, I don't want to waste time on technology. For those that it'll be recorded. So if those of you, maybe it's like on your end, possibly, and they'll be recording later to see that. But again, our goal is to get you good information. By all means, please use I know we were planning to do this on Restream, so we had a couple of technical issues. So feel free to use the chat. We love this to be interactive. Usually when we do these things, once we get 10, 15 minutes into the seminar, honestly, we like to kind of shut up as much as we're used to talking, and just answer your questions, right? And again, you can put them in anonymously, or if it's something more particular, you could reach out to Michael or myself, and you could schedule a one-on-one time if it's obviously something you don't want to put in the group. So again, to get into the material today, the focus is really, what do I do when I get to retirement, right? Financial planning. I mean, Michael and I, we tell our clients there's really two main jobs of a financial planner, right? And the first job is in the name. We are helping you develop a plan. It's just like you try to lose weight. That's a big epidemic in our country. Thus, all the whatever those shots are called now that people are taking, the little cheat codes. But you just don't get there without a plan, right? If you don't count your calories, you don't have a plan of attack on the exercise. You're not weighing yourself weekly. You're unlikely to hit your goals. Finances is really no different, right? We need a plan, and we need someone to help us keep to that plan. And that's really the main goal with any financial planner. And that's step one, is to get with the client, get with the 401k participant and say, look, let's talk about your wants, your needs, your goals, your desires, and let's figure out what that looks like, and let's get a plan to get there. And then the second job, which kind of leads into the more of the seminar today, is where do we put our hard-earned money and our assets to achieve those goals, right? So whether the goal is the next car, or sending our kids to college, or obviously today we're going to talk about how to retire and use our assets once we get there. How to save for the down payment on the house. There's so many financial goals. Very few people, again, to my example in the exercise world, they just fall short, right? And it's 99% of the time preventable with a solid plan. So I always throw out some stats to start these things. 70% of Americans don't feel like they're on track to retire. Only 60% of Americans are invested in the stock equity markets. 80% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. Only 25% of Americans have a trusted financial advisor. So that tells me, as a trusted financial advisor, there's not enough people out there doing planning or seeking it out. And I always talk about how daunting that is. How do I find a good financial planner? Again, that's where these things become very good, right? To reach out to Michael or myself as a resource, we're vetted through your plans and your companies as independent fiduciary advisors to really help give you unbiased advice. In the industry of our world, you never know if you go to a Northwestern Mutual guy or a bank advisor or a wirehouse guy or gal. You just don't know what you're getting. So that kind of leads into the stuff for today. Is the goal is, what do I do at retirement? How do I take my hard-earned money and how do I turn that into income streams? So again, there's some of the things that you see on the screen here that many of you have things in already: savings and investments, 401ks, IRAs, Social Security. All these things are income producing assets. There's other things, right? There's real estate, there's business ventures. Hell, Michael and I would tell you, many of our clients have side jobs that they do. Michael, if you want to go ahead and switch the slide and go to the next one.
Yep.
So there's lots of income sources that our job, as we get our, everyone here can obviously raise their hand, right? Who wants to retire? Raise their hand. I would assume everyone here is going to click that button that they'd like to retire someday, right? Oh, there we go. See, I think we all don't want to work forever. So everyone wants to retire, but very quickly after you retire, the concern is, how do I make sure I have enough money? So where do I withdraw from? What accounts do I withdraw from first? What are options and timing? Do I touch my Roth IRAs first? Do I go to my checking savings first? Lots of stuff goes into that, where Michael and I spend a lot of our time with our retiree clients. So goal number one is to get to retirement. Goal number two is to have enough to comfortably retire throughout, the longer and longer longevity that we're having. So we're going to talk about a couple strategies that we use to do that. But a lot of people don't have strategies or plans to this, and they end up getting significantly less, assets out of or significant less revenue out of their assets over time than people that are doing proper planning. So next slide. So order matters, right? So in my world, I mean, one of the credentials I hold is Retirement Income Certified Professional. So I took that class. It took a couple years ago, but it was very interesting about how you draw on certain accounts first in order to make your assets last as long as possible. And as far as when you talk about market-based accounts, and really almost any kind of accounts, you have taxable accounts, you have tax-deferred accounts, and then you have tax-exempt accounts. We're going to talk about this a few different times in the seminar. Michael will as well when we get to the back end of this. But everyone on here, I'm sure, has taxable accounts, right? We're talking checking savings accounts, money market accounts, CDs, and then tax deferred accounts. Most of us have in terms of, your pre-tax 401k dollars, your traditional IRA dollars. Then you have tax exempt, which are harder to come by. But that's where you talk about those Roth IRAs, cash value life insurance, rental real estate. There's some areas that are tax exempt, but just from a perspective of what makes sense to make your money last as long as possible, which is obviously the quick number one goal once you get to retirement. How do I get the most out of it as far as revenue? Where am I taking from first? So Michael and I would tell you, if you're on this call and you're close to retirement, we see it all the time that people get on our calendars to do a retirement consultation, and they have their aggressive stuff in their taxable accounts. They might be all international stocks in their taxable accounts, and in their Roth IRAs they got cash. Right? We see this all the time, and that is unfortunately backwards, and that could end up really hurting how much money you get out of your accounts over the course of retirement. So again, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Michael, if you want to hit the button. So again, most of you on the call, right, are probably joining us from, or I'm sure some of you are from our 401ks that we are the fiduciary advisor on. And gosh, my phones don't stop ringing with how many plans we have for people asking questions on what to do with their plan, which is great. And I think that should continue to be the case because you need to have a plan with these dollars. But when you retire from an employer and you have a 401k, there's options at your disposal, right? And a lot of people don't know the options. They're not sure which ones make the most sense for them. And it's not a one size fits all, right? So someone could be retiring at 65 and they actually do need to start drawing off the 401k. Others, they retired 65 and they got other assets, and we might not need that 401k bucket for 3, 4, 7 more years or whatever the case may be. So, you can take a lump sum distribution, which is pretty atypical, right? Because most folks' 401k dollars are in pre-tax, and we don't want a huge tax implication all at once. We could roll over to an IRA or another qualified plan if you're changing jobs. Again, Michael and I will always say 401ks are great growers. Again, people are working 20 to 40 years now. They're great, vehicles to build assets. When you get into the withdrawal phases, they tend to become very inefficient for that. IRAs open up the world of investment freedom, more flexibility, linking the money to your bank, not having to do as many forms when you need cash. So most tend to go the IRA route, or just heading into retirement. Annuities we'll talk about. A lot of money has flowed into this in the last 2-3 years because interest rates have been so high. CDs, money markets, annuities, they've really captured a lot of assets in the last 2-3 years. Again, because those products become very advantageous in a high interest rate environment. And as that environment maybe starts to come down here, I know that because we all watch the Powell and Trump chicken race as far as lowering interest rates, but that's probably coming in the next few months, and we're going to figure out what's going to happen, and then we'll have to make some adjustments, and products will change a little bit. So, but again, you can use a combined approach, which we'll talk about, but what to do with these things, we'll dig into that. Next slide. So balancing growth and income in retirement, right? So again, I mentioned before, there's the taxable bucket, the pre-tax, and the tax-free. We often see clients having the wrong kind of investments in different buckets. Same types of thing here. When we retire, we tell clients, look, we want to start thinking more about your market-based investments as almost like you're buying a rental property, right? Like if I go and I buy, Nvidia stock or some of these stocks that are roaring up in value in recent years, it's great value on paper, but a lot of those stocks don't pay you any dividends either, right? So as we get closer and closer to retirement, we obviously want to make sure, number one, we're protecting some of the assets, right? We don't want market-based risk on all of our monies. And then we also want to start shifting our money towards things that are producing income. So as you kind of see in the middle there, individual bonds, income-oriented mutual funds like bond funds, high dividend stock funds. Again, we'll talk about annuities in later slides, but annuities are insurance accounts, and a lot of them are generated or designed to derive income from. But again, when we retire, we still want some growth potential. So we want those growth stocks and things of that nature. But again, we typically want to hold those in the right kind of accounts. So again, it's a balancing act of, there's lots of different, and that's what I was saying as far as when I got started. The number two job of a financial planner is let's develop the goal, but where do the investments go, right? Let's put the investments, let's put the money in the right places for what the plan is. So next slide.
Yep.
So again, I mentioned annuities a couple times because they've done I think it was about $400 billion went into these last year. Again, just because rates have been substantially high, and I think that's at a 20-year high at this point. Still, they've crept down a little bit, but a lot of folks, when they get to retirement, they want some safety. So when you look at a 401k lineup, oftentimes, usually 80%, if not more, of or sometimes 90% of the holdings are just market-based mutual funds. Or even some that are bond funds, those can fluctuate up and down. And as you can imagine, common knowledge that as we get closer to retirement, we tend to want to have a good amount of our money in protection, right? We don't want a 2008. We don't want a 2001. We don't want a lot of our money exposed to a potential downturn in the markets. So if I can go take some of that money and I can go buy, per this slide, we're looking at like 3-4% in like fixed annuity rates on this slide. But I'll tell you right now, they got as high as 6.5%, but right now they're still around 5.5%. We still got a good amount of clients who are reaching out to us to get these. So understanding the split annuity planning idea, where you're taking some of your money and putting it in an annuity at 4, 5, 6% to get that build up. And then you're also putting it in one, and you're actually starting to draw that income out. So you're taking kind of market-based investments, right? They go up and down over time, and you're starting to kind of level out the playing field, if you will, to make sure you have that steady income stream. Next slide. And again, remember, please ask questions as we go here, and we get interactive. Make sure we answer you guys' questions. Again, so this is just another combination, a blended strategy of annuities, where you can divide money into different pools. So I mentioned before in the previous slide, you could do the just pure fixed annuity avenue, but then annuities also tend to be very popular for deriving lifetime income. Right. So if you have $500,000 in a 401k and it's all in market-based mutual funds, there's no assurances there, right? There's no protections that guarantee you're going to get lifetime income. Yes. So depending on how much you're taking out or depending on what your longevity is, you could run out of income there, right? So everyone in here has Social Security, right? So what we tend to talk to clients about is, look, what's your Social Security? And let's project out what your essential needs are. And usually let's try to line up that number with guaranteed income. So when we say essential needs, we're talking, your housing carry costs, your medical, your food on the table, your basic essentials, right? Your transportation costs. What's that number look like? Most retirees want to have peace of mind that flat income is going to be there. Sometimes Social Security is enough to cover that, and we don't really need to have more lifetime income. Sometimes we add a little bit more. And then beyond that, we look at, money markets and CDs and things that are going to get us a little bit more safety in our dollars there. So there's lots of strategies. There's lots of products. But again, that's really the second big goal of any financial planner, is to make sure you're putting your money in the right vehicles based on what your plan is.
Yeah. And Brian, let me just add one thing to that. Someone had asked a question in terms of annuities with high fees. And again, if this is not necessarily about an annuity, right, presentation here, but again, they're neither good nor bad. They're either appropriate or inappropriate for where you're at. And the one thing, Deborah, you asked a question: do annuities have high fees? What I will tell you is what we come across folks who have had an annuity. If you do own an annuity and it's more than 10 years old, you should definitely look at it. Yes, because some of the older annuity products could have 3, 4, 5%, even 6% internal fees, which absolutely is crazy to have that. Where some of the newer products, as Brian alluded to, with the much higher interest rates, and because technology has become so much more sophisticated, the fees have come down to, a percent. And in some cases, there's actually no embedded fees in the product. So again, it's not about it's they're neither good nor bad. They're either appropriate or inappropriate for where you're at. And at a high level, what we always tell folks is an annuity like that is basically, right, you have homeowners insurance, you have life insurance, you might have long-term care insurance, right? We all have different insurances over time. And some of these products can provide an insurance wrapper to a portion of your monies when it comes to that. So, Social Security, I'm in my late 50s now, right? So Social Security is on my horizon. Hopefully we'll be there. Brian's in his 40s. We joke and I tell him, he needs to call his congressmen and women and senators, because at this rate, it's not going to be there for him. Somewhere, some level it's going to be. So, couple of things. And here's the thing I always tell people. At its base and at its core, right? What we're talking about is you've accumulated wealth over a lifetime. How do you then monetize it? And as Brian alluded to when we first started talking, right? This is, in as much as these things we can touch upon, it is whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you have a partner, whoever it is, right? You have to come into this together or individually to understand where you're at. And is it enough, right? We work with hundreds of individuals and families and units, and everyone has different goals, right? So things that you want to keep in mind, right? IRA, and Brian alluded to 401ks, but we're also talking 403bs, 401ks, TSPs, all of these retirement plan kind of fall under the same guidance, right? And the law states that you have to, when you're retired at age 73, for most people, if you're already retired, it might have been 72. It used to be 70 and a half. Now it's 73. For someone like me, it's going to be age 75. The government says in monies that were pre-tax, you must start taking out the required minimum distribution at that time. Quite honestly, depending upon how much assets you have, a lot of our clients, the distributions that they're taking out of their retirement plans satisfy that of the RMD. So it's not you don't have to do two things. The RMD could very well satisfy it. And it's an actuarial number that's based upon the value and the account value on December 31st of the previous year in terms of what that looks like. So required distributions are you'll have to factor in. The other thing is, and for some of if you're younger on the call, or even if you're older and getting ready to retire, Roth 401ks or 403bs, if your employer has it, and or regular Roths are not subject to just required minimum distributions. IRAs and retirement plans, right? If something happens to me, my wife gets everything and she inherits it as a spousal. But once she passes away, if there's monies left over, then those monies will go to our children, and they have the years ago, you could stretch it out, you could prolong it. Now it's not. It has to be taken out in a 10-year period. If you've got monies in Roth, right, they're not subject to required distributions. Roths are fantastic vehicles if you've got children and or grandchildren that you are going to think to inherit. Those are fantastic vehicles to do that. So part of that planning is maybe you do look at conversion of some of your monies with regards to all of that, right? So again, the RMDs, you have to take that out, right? If you have all your monies in your 401k, you have to be careful with that, because if you miss it, that's why you want to be able to speak to an advisor or someone. You want to make certain you're satisfying the required distributions for you on that, right? Beneficiaries, and a large part of our conversations that we talk about is making decisions. We always say making decisions and having conversations when you're calm and you're clear, right? And a lot of times we have blended families, for us here, with regards to, blended marriages, second marriages, kids with different things, right? How does that look? What does that look like? Making certain that your beneficiaries are up to date in your 401ks and or IRAs, and even individual accounts. Speaking with someone to look at a trust for real estate or any of these. Too many times we see, I had a call with someone yesterday, right? And client, coming on board as a client and very, pretty substantial assets. She didn't want to disclose anything, right? And it was a second marriage, but they've been married for 30 years, but it was very tenuous. And if you don't do these and have these conversations and start planning these things out, right, that's really can be a tenuous. And if you're not here, Brian and I could tell you the claws come out, and it's just not a good thing. So again, I think Brian addressed when is a good thing to move from a Roth to a 401k. Again, that's going to be a little more nuanced based upon your situation and circumstance, right? You don't want to we want to make certain, number one, that you and your spouse and or your partner is taken care of first. And then beyond that, right? Because people are living, we always ask the question, what's the oldest person you know, right? And it's not uncommon to have, my father-in-law is 93 years old, right? So you got to plan that with regards to that.
I have
So
a few clients whose parents just turned 100.
yeah, I mean it's commonplace, and even for for folks who are younger with healthcare, medicine, just what we know now, longevity is on our side. And I say that's either good news or bad news, right? Social Security, I mean, I think in the past, we've done a presentation on Social Security. We'll talk on this at a high level. And Social Security can get very nuanced, right? At its earliest, you can take early Social Security at age 62, right? I caution against that because that represents almost off of, and then you also have what's called your full retirement age. So if you reach out to Brian and myself, one of the things we always will tell you is go on to ssa.gov, get your Social Security statement, right? And your spouse to make sure he or she has that, so we can have these conversations in terms of what it looks like for you. If you take it early and you're still working before your full retirement age, you'll pay additional taxes on those monies. You eventually will recoup them, but that can still have a big impact on the actual money you get. Listen, Brian and I manage together almost $500 million of clients' monies, right? And right now, the way it stands is every year you defer Social Security, your benefit goes up by 8%. Can't get that. That's pretty darn hard. Now, again,
Not even counting COLA.
Not even counting COLA, right? So it is even more substantial than that. Like a lot of times we do our calls on Zoom and Teams, and I always say, don't shoot the messenger, but 70 is the magic number. And here's the thing, I can't tell you, it just happened to me on Monday. A woman was referred to me, her husband's 71. I'm like, how much is he collecting Social Security? What do you think she said, he's going to wait till next year. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. 70 is the max. Do not wait any big thing beyond it. But 70 but growing at almost 8%, right? The difference between 67 to 70, you see here, is almost $1,000 a month. A lot of that depends upon your health, your longevity, how much assets you have. If your spouse was employed or was not, because he or she will collect off of either 100% of theirs or 50% of the spouses, depending upon how much those monies were. So it used to be more nuanced Social Security. It's kind of clear. It's gotten a little clearer, but nonetheless, it's still confusing. If you're divorced, as long as you were married 10 years, you can get money out. You can collect off of your spouses. Again, depending upon income levels and everything else, you don't need their authority or approval or any of that information. You just need to make sure you have his or her Social Security to get that. So Brian put in there the 72T. So if you retire, if you want to, again, I don't want to get too nuanced with this, right? But if you have monies in and you want to retire before age 59, I said I'm 58 years old, right? If I've got $1 million in my 401k, I can generate an actuarial number that for the next 5 years, I need to take out a certain percentage from my 401k or IRA without the penalty. I'll still pay my taxes on it. Again, we very cautionary because, someone who's 60 years old, could be living another 30, 40 years, that you want to, ratchet it down. I always tell people at a base level, as Brian alluded to, when it comes to dividends and annuities and all these, at a very base level, folks, let me tell you this. if you can live on between 4 to 5% of your money, right? As long as your advisor is not day trading, market timing, doing any kind of speculative, if you're diversified, right, in a proper portfolio based upon your assets, 5%, you should never run out of money. So if you've got $1 million, it's $50,000 a year. Then you have to factor in Social Security, spouse, if you have pensions, all of these. That's at a very base high level thinking. And again, we always say, don't shoot the messenger. But the reality of it is the expectations when you go to retire, right, there is fundamentally a light switch psychologically, mentally, and financially that turns off, right? And that paycheck that you're receiving from your employer stops, and now you're living on your monies. In the best laid plans, right? You might own your house, right? Or you might own your car, but I can't tell you how many folks, all of a sudden they get in an accident and the car gets totaled and they got to go buy a new car. And now interest rates are 6 or 7% on automobiles or air conditioning. So you have whatever the number you think, right? We always tell Brian, I can attest, take that number, even though you've worked it and you know it, add 15 to 20% to that in terms of what the expectation is. Social Security for many of you will play a good role in that, right? So when we talk about those distribution basics that Brian talked about, you've got an IRA, a Roth IRA, you've got a brokerage account, you've got savings account, you've got maybe, different investments. How do you monetize them? How do you start taking that money out? Do you have an annuity? Is it an income annuity, or is it just a guaranteed annuity, right? So I rhetorically tell folks, especially my younger, we do a lot of presentations for if they're younger, right? The goal when you get to retirement is not to be in the lowest tax bracket. Because in theory, if you're in the lowest tax bracket, pardon my bad English, that means you ain't got no money, right? Now, if you had all your money in the Roth, that would be a good thing because everything would come out and you'd be in a lower tax bracket. But again, the more money you have, the more taxes you pay, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you want to make certain that we're utilizing the right structures to minimize it. If you're retiring, depending upon age, right, 65, part of the conversation you want to look at is Medicare, and what those look like, and the healthcare coverage that you get for yourself, or the supplements or the advantages, or if your spouse is younger, what's that gap look like, right? And how, this is in terms of how you withdraw, how you think about how you monetize, how do you create that income to live off for a long time. So it can get a lot more. Your financial picture. Brian, Rick, do we talk about this every day? And people always come to us and they want to do a budget, right? Or and make a budget. And I always say budgeting is very simple, right? And a lot of this is simple math, but it can get overwhelmed. And budgeting is what's coming in and what's going out, right? What's coming in we can control relative to if we're currently working, if we have a part-time job, all of those things. What's going out are the variables, right? What are we spending on gas? What are we spending on our phone? What are we spending on our internet connections, on our car and insurance, right? And you want to understand those. Long-term care, home health, people are living longer. What expenses are associated with this? I can speak for myself, that sandwich generation. I've got a kid in college, I've got a grandchild, I've got parents who are alive and in-laws who are alive. So there's a lot of different things going on, right, that you have to factor, and expenses come with it. I see people all the time maintaining 2 properties, right? It's not just having one, it's exponentially greater. So you want to, identify those. And Brian, what's the number you use regularly in terms of how much expected you want if your income is, 100,000, how 70, 80, 90%?
Of what?
Of your once you retire, if you're making $100,000.
I mean, most studies will say it's usually like 75% of your final income is what you're going to need to be comfortable in retirement. Because a lot of people, again, a lot of the clients, I spoke to a client yesterday, and this tends to be the case, right? They had a big home, they had kids are out on their own, they got grandkids, and the house is too big for them. They usually downsize, they don't want stairs. So, usually when couples or individuals retire, they tend to downsize the property. They're not going to and from work if they're in the office job. I know that's changed a lot with COVID, but usually a lot of expenses fall off. But certainly in the early retirement years, sometimes you see that kind of bridged up a little bit with people wanting to travel, right, in their early retirement years while they're still getting around pretty good. So 70, 80% is usually like the watermark that most people are trying to, get on to be on track. Again, a plan is much more important to have a detailed plan, but high level, if you're just going high level, that's a good hurdle to look at.
Yep.
Looks like we had a couple questions. I was just going to answer a few of them. Let some Michael, then
Yeah.
give the floor back to you here. There's
Sure,
our
sure.
Leonardo. I answered a couple of the Social Security. I've been pretty active on the chat here to answer some of these while you were talking. Are the monthly amounts received from Social Security an accurate amount or based on the economy? So I think it's the average indexed monthly earnings. It's like AIME. So it's the average monthly earnings over your highest 35 years of working. That it's literally just a mathematical calculation. So when you get the statements in the mail, they're also projecting that you're going to keep earning what you're earning to some degree too. So you have to kind of take that into account. But yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the economy. It's just the formula and how they derive it. As long as you've worked 10 years and 40 quarters, you're fully insured in the Social Security pension, and it's just the numbers are the numbers.
Yeah.
Hotch, you want to take another one of
Yeah,
these?
yeah. So there's one question in terms of why would you not take Social Security early, right? And trust me, we get this all the
All the
time, right?
time.
It's instinctively and instinctually, you just want to, right? You've put in, you just give me that
You
money,
want the
right? I
money.
want the government money right away. And it is more nuanced than that because depending upon how much assets you have, if you take it early at 62 versus your full retirement, it's almost a 35% reduction from that, right? And that can be if you live into your late 70s, 80s, 90s, taking it early will literally cost you possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's software that we have that we can run these calculations. Here's the thing I will say with Social Security, right? In some form, things are going to change, right? In terms of right now, there's a Social Security wage cap that you're if you're working, you pay some, your employer pays some up to the maximum wage cap of it's like $180,000 this year. I keep all these numbers I can't keep up with, right? But eventually they're gonna probably kick that up to 250,000. It might be some super high net worth folks will get a scale down of any of that. So I we don't know, right? But the reality is for folks, if you're in your late 50s or 60s, I would say it's safely, you're pretty, I feel much more comfortable saying that it's going to be there with regards to that. In terms of figuring out cost for health insurance and those options, right? At a very high level, right? I mean, if you think about it, when you get older, vision, dental, hearing, well, I can tell you, right? I mean, most seniors, and my father-in-law has hearing aids and he probably loses them once every 6 months, right? Unfortunately, they've come down in costs, but that can be cost. So it's almost $1,000 a month, depending upon your health with regards to medicine, Medicare, doctor's visits, all of these different things that you want to look at. So I think Brian put in there, again, you can Brian put in his contact. Brian, you can even put my contact in. You can ping us on that stuff with regards to that. We've talked about tax-free, the Roth. I mean, that's a great way to look at and putting money away, growing tax deferred, not paying any money on the distributions when you come out down the road. Do you want to convert some of those to the Roth, some of your monies to the Roth so that you can pass it on to children, the taxable brokerage accounts, right? The one thing I always tell people, especially if you're coming to us from either we're the advisors on your 401k or 403b, if you're in those plans, you are an investor, right? Too many times we see folks who have outside accounts or different things and they're trying to buy and sell and they're speculative, right? That's speculating, right? Slow, we call it get rich slowly, right? There's no get rich quick, right? And if someone tells you they got guarantees of this or that are crazy numbers, and this, if it sounds too good to be true, if it sounds too good to be true, folks, it usually is, right? And we all have these. So you can imagine, Brian and I do these presentations, and I keep my phone open all the time. You can't imagine the obscure feeds I get, for that. I always say is, I do cooking. We watch puppy dogs and home decorating is what I get from my Instagram and whatever. I don't even do the TikTok thingy here, but right. So again, look at the income sources, where they're going to be derived from. Again, you've got all these now. Also, we didn't even touch upon health savings accounts, right? If your employer offers a health savings account, that's like the home run, right? You can put the money in pre-tax. If you've got enough, you can invest in it and it grows tax deferred. And then you pull it out down the road, tax-free for dental, vision, premium, you name it, all of those types of things there. So, all of these have a role, right? We talk about wills, powers of attorney, advanced medical directives, proper registration. So many times I see folks will come to me, and a husband and wife, they married, and accounts are registered solely in one individual's name with no beneficiary or that's a disaster waiting to happen if you've got property in other states that are in your name. Powers of attorney are important. Talking to your spouse or your partner, your children or nieces or nephews, where all of that looks like. So having all of these things planned out, your investments, again, your automobile, homeowners, right? These are all the things we always say is you don't want to find out what type of homeowners insurance you have while the house is burning down, right? You want to do that. Life insurance coverage is really important for you. Whether you have whole life, universal, all of these different products we talk about. We have the annuities. I think actually we did omit the long-term care aspect to that, right? In terms of what that looks like. If you need home health care, assisted living, for yourself long-term. I have a lot of folks who are single, right? And, that's something that you really want to, take advantage of when it comes to how you plan things out. So one of the questions is, Brian and our financial advisors, we are there's the big word fiduciaries, right? What that means, we always say we laugh because we've been doing this for, Brian, 20 years, myself, 27 years. It just means you're not pushing products and you're doing what's right for the other folks. So, one of the things we can do is kind of just help walk you through a lot of this information that it comes to that. So again, where these sources are, what it looks like, right? For many years, like for many of us, our parents or grandparents, right? They had pensions, they had Social Security. Heck, they could go open money in a savings account and get 12 or 13%, right? So it was very easy. Now it was like a four-legged stool. Now, then it was a three, and now you're seeing fewer and fewer companies that are actually putting in pensions for you. So then the onus becomes on you, your 401k, your 403b, your IRAs, all of this, and it can get pretty daunting, right? And I said, we're investment behavioral. This year's a perfect example, right? We can't control the markets. You can control your risk tolerance, and how you're allocated, right? But we went in January, February, right? The markets went down almost 12%. The tariffs were on, the tariffs were off. They were, Ukraine, Middle East, you name it. And all of a sudden now we're back up to record highs. So we don't prognosticate or forecast, but this all has to meld in, right? Because I mentioned I'm 58, getting ready to, thinking, 10 years from retirement. Brian's much younger. His risk tolerance is way higher than mine, right? Because my ability to take on too much risk, right? It gets a little more daunting for me. When it comes to a lot of how we're allocated and what we're doing there. So part of it is, sorry about that.
Oh, what happened?
Sorry, I bumped something here.
While you put that back, I was going to answer a couple of these, or unless, Hush, you want to finish up real quick, and then we can hit some of these questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see, with a couple of them. One I saw up here, again, we really want to make sure we get you guys answers, so you leave some good stuff on your questions. Someone asked about trusts. I'm an accredited estate planner. Michael deals with a lot of trusts with attorneys as well, with clients. Revocable and irrevocable trust, really the main difference there is irrevocable is you really don't have a lot of things you can change once you put them in place. But they're great to have. You probably won't say with many financial planners that say having a trust document. Again, trust comes in all flavors, shapes, and sizes because you can draw them out almost however you want. And whether it's a special needs trust or for legacy for kids or whatever. But they're great to have, especially getting around probate and skipping probate costs in some cases, making your estate private, things like that. So yes, I'm a big trust fan. It's just a matter of spending the right time and a few grand to sit with an attorney and a planner to put one down. Someone asked a question about good retirement income books. I don't know any off the top of my head. I don't know if Michael does. I would tell you, unbiasedly, there's some retirement income books out there kind of derived at shooting you certain ways, which may or may not fit all people, right? Everyone is in different situations. So I would say if you do read any books, grain of salt it, right? As far as, reading a couple. And then again, that's where a good Michael and myself or, an independent advisor can help you kind of sift through the noise and figure out what's going to be what makes sense for you and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Planning software. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, one of the
Someone asked. Yeah, go ahead. No, you're up. Go. Oh,
So,
sorry.
one of the questions is, in general, do you work whole life insurance? Again, that's going to be 90% of what we would always do is like for folks is term insurance, right? Get as much as you can for smaller amounts. Whole life, right, is kind of permanent. It builds value. You have equity. You'll maintain it for the rest of your life. Sometimes it makes sense to have a smaller portion in that type of policy. I know there are some schools of thought to put that's what Brian was alluding to, or some that says put everything in that, but nowadays with having the Roth because some whole life can work kind of like a Roth, it grows tax-free, you can pull it out tax-free, but the reality of it is if you're maximizing your Roth contribution, if your spouse is working and putting in 30,000 into the Roth, right, you can really manipulate and get a lot of better vehicles with a lot less cost. And that's part of that kind of financial plan that you look at. And again, it's not, we get away from the product pushing and all that other stuff. Too many times, some of these books are, you watch the commercials, some of them are just go buy everything and put everything in annuity, or there's the one guy, who claims
everything to Roth,
or convert everything to Roth, or we don't do any, annuities. We just do, we make money when you make money, but you have to look at the whole picture is really what Brian is.
Yeah, Michael, you're not sharing the slide deck, by the way. I mean, people are texting or chatting. You're sharing like the Teams. You're just sharing the wrong window to change that so people can see the slides. While you're doing that, Michelle, it's funny you asked that question. Are you a fiduciary? The quick answer on us is yes. But I just finished my my certified financial planner like CE for the year and re-upped my, paid my money for that. It's like $600 every 2 years. How do I put this? Anyone can say they're a fiduciary, though. I think the big thing is to Michael's point is just to make sure that when you're interviewing financial planners, do you have like productions you need to hit? Are there trips incentives? Do you make in-house product that you're incented to sell, have to sell? I mean, you just want to ask these questions because ideally you want to get with somebody that's doing your planning, and ultimately you're going to need product, whether it's investment vehicles or insurance products or whatever. You just want someone that can be able to really, scour the entire marketplace to find the best fit for you. So a lot of people can say it, and it's a big thing for the people that are searching for planners that you've done some good due diligence to make sure you ask that question. Just make sure you ask additional follow-up questions to that, because anyone can say they are. It's really asking those additional questions to confirm if they're, again, to Michael's point, I won't mention names, but there's one of those outfits out there that markets a lot on TV, and they say, well, we don't sell commission products. I'm like, well, then you're not a fiduciary, because if the client needs life insurance or long-term care, that's how those products pay the advisor. So you're not having access to those products. That doesn't truly make you a fiduciary. Having access to the world and getting all the options, that does. So that's a great question, though. I think, did we lose Michael? Mike, you still with us? You guys can still hear me, right? Am I coming through okay?
We can hear you.
Yes, I guess we lost Michael. Yeah, I guess he'll join us back. Maybe he lost the feed, but let's see what this is great. You guys are sending questions. Let's see what else we got here. Is this webinar for several companies or just one company? I just started at my company, so we work with NFP and WellSense program for employees. Just want to understand the complementary benefits for employees joining for both myself and our company. This, to my knowledge, we don't handle who it goes out to. We're just obviously here as the advisors to give the information. But to my understanding, it goes out to, our various groups, from our benefits, health insurance groups and 401k clients groups, and, all the, property casualty groups, all the things that NFP provides on a group basis. So I think that's where all this went to. But again, we're here as fiduciaries. I'm salaried to do complimentary reviews. My schedule is always tight, but if you get on my scheduling link, it might be 2, 3 weeks before you get on it, but I'm happy to have complimentary meetings with folks. And as I mentioned in the chat, financials are daunting. We've talked so much about various things already, and this is just retirement. We're not talking about college education, or we're not talking about just pure button or debt management or whatever, right? There's so many areas. It's so aggressive, but it's so important that a lot of people it's too much. So when you sit with somebody and they can give you direction because it's not your thing, I mean, the stress can really come down. People are much more, they feel much better about their plan once there is one. Happy to do that for you guys. And again, you can email in. I mean, Kelly will put that up at the end of the meeting, but we'll reroute you to one of our advisors that can make sure that they get with you. Michael just texted me that he can't get back in, so he's working on doing that. Is good software to run simulations? I actually don't know of that software. Someone had mentioned up above good planning software. The two biggest planning ones that in the industry are eMoney and Money Guide Pro. That's what we subscribe to, both of those top subscriptions, and most of our clients are on that technology. Um, I've heard of it, but I'm not too familiar with it. But so yeah, I don't want to. Again, I'll always tell clients I'll speak on what I know, and if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to just give you a fake answer. So you feel free to email me. I'm happy to look into it, but I'm not too familiar with them. Let's see. I was recently talked into switching all my savings into annuity, and after it's on the forms, it didn't sit right with me. I canceled the transfer, but since all my investment accounts had already been cashed out, the transfer, I'll be paying thousands of taxes, even though I cancels it out. Whenever you do an annuity, there's always like a 30-day what's called free look period. So I assume you just, for whatever reason, I don't know the details, that you pulled out of it. I assume maybe you're talking about you sold non-taxable accounts, right? So you just took the capital gains on maybe what you sold. That's a stickier one. That might be more something to speak with the accountant on, or maybe an attorney, depending. But it sounds like it'd just be more of a tax thing, or you could kind of go back to see what you bought and see if there's something you could do there. That's a stickier one. So I think that's great. So we have people helping people here. So someone here has used Bolden and they say it's a wonderful tool. So that's great. Um, the last slide, yeah, I mean, I think that was the second to last or last slide. So there wasn't much more material there. I think, again, the main thing is we're here to help you, right? The main focus was today is how do I turn that hard-earned income stream in retirement? There we go. Kelly's putting it back up. How do I turn that money? How do I turn the nest egg into a rental property, right? How do I have it paying me money, and how do I draw it out to get the most out of it? And just that alone, we're not even talking about Medicare choices. And we talked a little bit about Social Security. Those choices are always tough. A lot of our clients want to take earlier. Again, if you think about it, any pension is really biased towards those who have good longevity, right? Whether it's nature or nurture, those who live longer are just going to win on Social Security, right? It just is what it is. So I always tell folks that when you're making the Social Security decisions, we run Social Security analyzers to kind of show the total output of what you're going to get by age 70, 75, 80, depending on when you want to draw it. So that helps people make the decision. But normally, if you have good projected longevity, and I say like age 80 or above, and you don't plan and you have other assets to draw on, most people are delaying it just because they're going to get more money out of it. Now, if your longevity is just not good in your family, or you got a lot of health things going on, and the projection isn't 80 plus, I mean, none of us know our demise, right? But if the projection isn't good for 80 plus, and or you need the money, that's where we'll tend to have clients tend to draw on Social Security earlier. Again, I think there was a whole life question. I think Michael did talk about it. Again, someone asked an annuity question earlier. Is a variable annuity with a guaranteed lifetime withdrawal benefit a good choice? Trying to ask me that's like asking a personal trainer if drinking this kind of water is better than the other, right? There's not enough detail in that question, because there's hundreds of insurance companies with, usually they have 4 or 5 different annuity products, if not more, with different bells and whistles on them. So depending on the one you bought and what you're buying it for, again, that's our secondary job as a planner, is finding the right product to help you achieve the plan, which is step one. So again, you just got to be careful. So it's back to whole life insurance. It has its place. And in some places it doesn't. Like, I'll sit with clients all the time and they were just sold whole life, and I'll sit down with them and we'll look at the whole view and their whole picture and what their goals are. There was no reason for them, in my professional opinion, for them to buy life insurance, for whole life insurance. There was no need for it. And then other times they bought what did seem to make sense. So again, back to being finances being so daunting, there are tens of thousands of products you can put your money in, from insurance products to mutual funds to ETFs to annuities. Like I said, that is literally job 1B of a good independent financial planner, is how do I sift through the 50,000 options we can put your money in and find something that makes sense. So again, it's tough to do, but that's part two of two, of the job. So, I know we're coming up on time here. Let me see if there's any more questions. Look, thanks for all the questions. We like these to be more interactive than possible, because I know, trust me, as many seminars as I sit in on other things, they can get a little tiring if someone just talking and putting up slides. So hopefully you guys took away some good information from this. Again, for those of you who need wellness points, Nest Egg is the passcode. The next one of these will be September 10th at 2 p.m. Again, feel free to use this as a resource. Again, 30% of Americans have financial planners. I'm a big proponent of that. It's that low because it's too daunting to find one. Well, so do I want a bank advisor? Do I want an insurance advisor? Do I want an independent advisor? Should they be a CFP? Like, I have no idea how to sift through that noise and what questions to ask. Why would I even bother looking for one? I don't know how to sift through all that. So we're a good resource because we cut through that noise. We're independent. We're fiduciaries. We don't have any skin in the game. We're salaried to do the complimentary reviews. Utilize it for us. And we're happy to get you on our calendars, and we have a wide advisor network around the country. We'll get you taken care of. So as Kelly's showing in that email, feel free to drop an email in there. We'll make sure you get taken care of. At least we'll get your questions answered. With that, is there any more questions you guys have? I don't want to, I always say the most important asset is not products, but it's time. Everyone on here, we have a limited amount of it, so I don't want to go. I want to be respectful of your time here. But again, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for the engagement and the questions. I hope we hit most of the questions, if not all of them. I was making sure we tried to do that. And with that, I'm sorry. There's a quick question for wellness points. It's Nest Egg with a space in the middle, I believe. Kelly could probably comment, or someone could comment in the chat if that's not correct. But I think that's what it is. But anyway, no, thank you for the time again, and you guys have our information up on the screen, and I'm sure Michael and I'll be back doing another one of these at some point. I'm sure it'll probably be someone different for the September 10th one, so we try to make sure we're getting different faces in front of you guys. But other than that, thank you guys for your time and joining, and have a great rest of your week wherever you're joining us from, and we'll see you next time.